it all kind of falls apart, because if I don't have everything set up and ready to go, it's kind of a pain. So yeah, here we are. Let's see if we've got anything happening live here. Ooh, looks like we are live. Can you let me know how you can hear things? How is the voice on the stream? Just pop into the chat and let me know. I'm actually gonna move these devices around so that I can see better. Let's see here. There we go. Yeah, let me know how things are in the chat and how the voice is, if you can hear it. And let's see, now there's a pretty subtle kick drum going on there. See how you guys can hear that. How's that sounding? Is it, yeah. Can you hear the kick? Let me know. Can you hear the kick in the hat? Let's, yeah, let's see what we got there. So, yeah, I just put in the chat how things sound. I want to make sure that we're not starting off with things sounding terrible before we get going here, because there's a bunch of cool stuff to go over. And yeah, that includes what you guys all probably saw in the thumbnail, which is why you clicked on this to come to this video, is that, yeah, we are going to talk about this little guy right down here, the MKII One Mark II, which is the, a little bit of an awkward name, I think, the MKII One II. I don't know why we didn't call it the MKII II, but it's the MKII One Mark II. And yeah, we're going to have some discussions about this. I've been messing around with this since I brought it back from Super Booth. I messed around with it a couple times, just really lightly on the surface, and then over the last 24 hours, I've been going a bit deeper into the inner workings of the MKII One Mark II, and trying to figure out a little bit of how I'm going to use it. And I think actually more importantly, how I'm going to set it up. That's one of the big things. Is it's a pretty dramatic shift from the original MKII One, the Mark I. So it's a pretty dramatic shift in the layout as from a user standpoint. So obviously looks very familiar, looks very similar. You know, sequencers work the same. Most of the function buttons are the same. So when I say layout, I don't mean that that's changed. I mean having 8 sequencers, and those can each be up to 8 lanes. Obviously I don't have that many devices, so deciding what's going to go on a multi-sequencer, which things I'm going to break out and have be on individual sequencers. And there are certain functionalities that only work, for example, with like mono mode rather than the multi-mode. So if I want to use that functionality, am I going to put that on one of its, on a sequencer all by itself? So yeah, I've been kind of reevaluating things. I had this really organized system before, and now it's gotten a little bit of a it's been a little bit turned on its head. So yeah, we will see. Let's see, I'm hearing that there's a little bit of static in the audio, and I know that I have some USB ground issues here, so let me see what I can sort. If this fixes it. No, that does not. So I think it's cameras. If I take this one out. Ooh, there we go. Yeah, it was the power to the camera that also has the audio going into it. So that should be better. Let me know if you can hear if that USB ground loop static has gone away. At least for the most part. It seems like there's a little something left, but That little something, I think, is probably something we're gonna have to live with right now, because all my stuff, as I mentioned, because I had taken things apart to travel, put it all back together, realized a bunch of stuff was not charged. So now I'm trying to charge things up at the same time that I'm trying to use it. Let's see if I take that up, if that helps. Okay, I'm not hearing that one. So anyway, we'll do our best. But yeah, that one bit I know was the worst part. So that was this one camera. So I'll just make sure to watch. Oh, that camera's charged to 100%. So we should have no problem at all with that one. So yeah, let's talk Oxy 1 Mark II. So a couple of things that changed for me, and let me just grab my Mark I here. So I can set this here so we can compare the two of them. One of the things you'll notice, I had my tape here that was delineating part of how I had things set up within my Mark I. And if you notice, I had my things numbered from bottom to top, 1 to 8. And then I had those corresponding to tracks 1 through 8 plus on my mixer, things moving left to right. So now there are actual numbers for all those things, and they are 1 to 8 going top to bottom. So I got used to always having certain things in certain places. So now I'm kind of working those around and moving things so that it still makes a little bit of sense to me. But yeah, that was just one of the things that was a little bit of a new setup thing. And then we'll talk a little bit more about it. As I mentioned, certain things, certain functionality functionality that I want to use doesn't work on the multi-mode. So pulling those things out into individual mono tracks to have them work, and we'll go through a bit of that in a little bit. So one thing just to show you, I did get a lot of questions about size. So if you can see the height of the Mark I versus the Mark II is exactly the same. And if you lay the Mark I over the Mark II, the only difference is it's 1 row longer, which is this row right here. So everything else is the same. The encoders are the same width apart. The screen is a good amount bigger, actually. It's, if I turn this one on, you can probably kind of see it, but it's probably 25% larger, 20% larger. So a good amount, which makes a difference because there's a lot of stuff that you can see going on here. It allows the writing to be a bit bigger. They can use kind of a bold font in this one, which is pretty good. But yeah. So those are kind of physical differences. Obviously button layouts, this used to be the 4 sequencer buttons, and now these are for performance mod, generative, and flow, which we'll talk about each one of those things going forward today, and a little bit about what they are and my just scratching the surface on how to use them because I'm just learning the device. So I'll be yeah, we'll be learning together as we go through this. So let's see, if you have any questions about things, definitely pop it into the chat. I'm gonna go over here, just kind of check and see what the questions are right now. Audio static fixed, awesome. Hey there. Let's see, you gotta run. So we'll watch the recording, but it would be cool to see the performance mode. Wondering if it's similar to the one in the Play or Deluge community firmware. I won't be able to compare it to those because I sold my Deluge before the community firmware came out, and the Play I have not used, but I will go through the performance mode. It's actually one of my favorite new sections of this because it's super functional, and yeah, so that's one of the things that we will go over. That'll be one of the early on things that we go over. So just getting started, a couple of quick things that I had gotten questions about the Mark II that I want to make sure that that I got to right away. So I use the Oxy Split, which is, see if you can see this. I can move it into camera, maybe there, Oxy Split. Yeah, so this is like the MIDI hub, which takes the single MIDI out from this and it splits it into multiple MIDI paths. Did that with the Mark I. It split it into 3 different MIDI paths. The Mark II has the potential for 6 MIDI paths, but the split Mark I still works with the Mark II. If you go into the configuration settings and you go to MIDI and you go to Aux split selection, you get the choice between off split V1 with 3 outs or split V2 with 6 outs. So I'm using split V1 with 3 outs, so I can still use it exactly the same. And when I get a split V2, I'll be able to use the 6 outs. So it went from 48 channels of outgoing MIDI to 96 channels of outgoing MIDI. And as many people will say, why would you need 96 channels of outgoing MIDI? Well, part of that is because there's 8 sequencers now with multiple mod lanes per sequencer. So that allows you to send out a ton of modulation, not just to a modular setup, but to a whole bunch of different keyboards or synths or whatever. So if you have synths that maybe don't have a lot of good built-in modulation, you can actually send modulation from here or have it modulate internal sources that are then sent out. So for example, you could modulate velocity internally here with an LFO, and then you could send out that velocity that's being modulated to a synth that may not have the ability to modulate the velocity within the synth. So a lot of stuff that you can do internally and send it out, and having all those extra channels makes it so that if you've got a bunch of synths, it's you can control more stuff. Or if you're using it to control Ableton as well, or other software. So being able to have a lot of MIDI out allows you to keep a lot of control here that you can then send out from there. The other question is, so I use the Aux pipe, which you can't see because it's under this tangle of wires over here, which is my 8 CV and 8 gate outputs that are all patched into my modular. And that connects with an HDMI cable to the Aux 1 so that it puts out all of those channels just with one cable connection, and then everything else can stay connected. Again, there's a pipe Mark II that will be out if it's not out already. But the Pipe Mark I works exactly the same way with this. The only difference is the labels, because let's see if you can see through the cables. Down below the CV and gate, there's a clock and reset, and those were inputs in the past. So like if you wanted to take a clock from your modular and then plug it in here, it would clock your Aux 1. But nobody that I knew was using it that way. We were all clocking things from the Aux 1. And so now the way that the Mark II works is it sends clock out. So those are now clock and reset out. So I can leave that patched, which I used to have a clock out coming from the back of the Aux 1 going into my case. And now I don't need to do that. I can just leave it patched, and then that's all just one cable. So now when I roll up for a show, I can just connect HDMI, one MIDI cable, and I'm ready to go. Right now I have USB-C because I forgot to charge this up, but normally it's battery powered, and I normally play with it on battery power. So it's just 2 cables, and then you can roll. Physically as well, the HDMI connector went from a mini HDMI to it went from a micro HDMI to a mini HDMI inside the device, which is a lot more sturdy. You can actually feel when you put it in, it clicks in, which the other one didn't. And I was always worried that it was going to break. And I know that people did have some concerns with them breaking. This one seems very tough. So yeah, the HDMI out is another big hardware plus in our new device here. Let's see what else hardware wise. Oh, the Mark II also has an SD card, which we'll talk a little bit about what that would be for, but you can save unlimited projects, for example, into the SD card. Before it was limited the number of projects you could save. Now you can save unlimited projects, which is pretty badass. You can, one of the new functionalities is there's a groove pool, kind of like what you would find in Ableton, where you can put grooves on individual tracks and have those be like certain types of custom swing, basically. You can create grooves within this and then save them to the disk, save them to the SD card, and so that you can have kind of unlimited grooves. You can also save custom scales and things like that to there, and additional projects. So that's great. Expands out the memory, so you don't have to keep all that stuff internally, which allows them to have a lot more stuff without cluttering up the memory so that they can do all sorts of updates like Manuel is always doing, because he's kind of a crazy person with doing updates on the Oxy stuff. So, so yes, that's the other physical change. I don't think there's anything else. So still 8 CV and 8 gate outputs, clock in, clock out, MIDI in, MIDI out, USB-C, which can also be host. So yeah, so that's kind of the physical layout of the thing. So definitely pop in the chat if you have questions, again, about any of this stuff as we're going on, and I will try to get to it. Let's see here. Secondary market is flooded with Oxy 1 MK1s, I think is what you mean. The prices are coming down fast. It's a good time to buy. It is. And this is a great time for us to have a conversation. We talked about this in a live stream I did a couple days ago, but I just wanted to quickly touch on this. One of my kind of pet peeves in the music gear world is that when a Mark II of something comes out or an upgrade comes out, there's a perception that the Mark I of that thing is now worse than it was before. And the reality is, right now most people don't have a Mark II. And the Mark I is a pretty amazing device. That was why I put on the thumbnail. So sorry. I still have a cold from my travel. That's why I put on the thumbnail that my favorite sequencer is getting replaced, because the Oxy 1 Mark I is my favorite sequencer. And it's being replaced by the Oxy 1 Mark II, which is my new favorite sequencer. And that one is my second favorite sequencer. So it's not that it's any worse than it was. So if if you don't particularly need the functionality that's changing in this device, the Mark I is still just as good as it was a week ago, when it was the only one available and when it was being sold for full price. So it is still the great device that it was, and it's still going to be supported by Oxy. So, I mean, if you can get them at a discount right now in the secondary market, go for it, because it's an amazing, amazing device. If you want these new upgrades that we're going to talk about today, then you might want to get one of these, but you definitely don't need it. I'm going to keep my Mark I, and I'm going to use it as my studio device. So it will just stay connected to Ableton, because I hate the sequencers in Ableton. And so it'll just be a way for me to keep going with that. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with the Mark I now that the Mark II is out. So most of the things are the same. There are some upgrades in this that are performance oriented that may make this a viable or a desirable purchase for some people. But if you don't need those performance things, if you're not performing, if you're using this just as a studio tool or to play your music at home or whatever, you might not need to spend the money on this. So really, I wouldn't say just because there's a Mark II, you have to get a Mark II. So that's not what this is about. This is just to show you what those differences are. And so you can make the decision like, oh yeah, that's cool, but I don't necessarily need that. So the Mark I is great. Or, oh yeah, that's cool, I definitely need that, so I'm gonna get the Mark II. Whatever you decide, either way is good. But I just wanna show you what these things are, what it does. So, yes, if there are any other questions, feel free to put them in there. Otherwise, I'm just going to jump right in to the things that this does. So let's get started. First and foremost, most everything over on the left side of the device is the same as what it was in the past. So configuration, your kind of arrangement mode, your keyboard modes, your arpeggiator, things like that. Those are all still the same. Then the buttons in the middle are more or less the same. There's a page button in the center, which we'll talk about in a second. But for the most part, those stay relatively similar. Where we get something new is these 4 buttons over on the side that used to be sequencers 1, 2, 3, 4. And now they are performance, mod, gen, and flow. So let's get started with performance first, because we had a question about that already, which is great because it's the top one. It's the first one. And it's a very cool new view, basically, for using the device as a performance device. So when you click on performance, what this page is now, everything that's on the left side of the page is the sequencers. Okay, so you have mutes for every sequencer over here. So you'll see track 1 or sequencer 1 is a multi-sequencer. So these are actually mutes for the 8 individual tracks. So you can mute those individually. And then when it's a mono, a chord, a poly, or whatever, it just shows up with a mute over here on the side. So you can mute those here, and you can mute and unmute multiples, which is cool. But it's nice because it used to be that you had to go into the multi, mute things, and then go into the next one in order to do others if you weren't going to mute the entire sequencer. So with multiples, with the multi-sequencer, this is really, really super handy. Now, the right side is actually other performance functions. So if it's a multi, these are repeats and loops, so that you can set it to, let's say, loop 2, 4, 8, 16, and it will loop the sequence that's playing of your drum pattern, of your drum sequence. And then you can also do kind of repeat fills. So if you want a certain section to kind of do a little fill, you can do a thing like that and put it on and off so it gets you a little bit of fill in time and then goes back. So that one's neat. These are the really cool ones. So if you have a mono, a chord, a polyphonic, whatever sequence that you're using, this becomes a transpose. So the white marks your root note of whatever scale you've chosen here. And this allows you to transpose up by semitones or down by semitones. And it's non-destructive, so it's keeping your original sequence where it is, and it's just transposing up as you do this. So to be able to kind of play along with stuff, so let's see, do I have anything in any of these sequencers? Let's do something here. So if we just put in a random sequence like this, and then we go back into performance mode, that's on track 2. So then I can transpose. So it gives you a way to transpose as you're playing, and you can do multiple tracks at the same time. You can change things to different transpositions. You can transpose all of them, bring them all back to place. So it's really handy as a performance tool to be able to take one pattern, move that, transpose that up, whatever, 5, and these are in semitones. So up 5 or up 7 or down 7, and being able to have things be melodic, so you can take one thing and really play it as if it was moving around the keyboard, which is very interesting. Just to show you really quick what these, what the other ones sound like. Here. So if you have just a kick and hat going, and you wanted to do a loop, you can't really hear it because it's already on that timing. And it loops wherever you pick it up. So again, it's not necessarily in the time, and then these ones are fills. Right, so ways that you can perform the sequences that you have in the other ones, all from one view. Also, being able to have mutes all on one page. So if you're playing, so we have multi-track, and then we have something playing here. Let's say we want to mute everything except the kick drum. I can mute the hat and the bass line, and just let the kick play. Bring back in the hat, and then bring back in the bass line. So it gives you a way to really perform whatever you've got as far as sequences over on the other side, just from one view, which is super, super, super handy. All right, let's go back over here to the chat. So Is it possible to set individual scales for each track in the multi-track sequencer? No, scales are by sequencer and multi-track is a sequencer. So generally, like I use multi-track as a drum sequencer, so having the scale is not super important. Although what you what you can do, if you're in a multi-track, if you do shift and the track itself, no, sorry, not shift in the track. If you do the track of the multi-track and then one of the rows, so like would be output 5 or track 5 of the multi-track, you get a choice of an offset. So you can set those to different things, which in effect changes the root note of that individual lane. It doesn't change the scale. So if you have the scale set as Phrygian or chromatic or minor or whatever you have it set at, it will still be in that scale, but you can have different root notes. And so obviously octaves, but also individual root notes. So you can have one line that has, a root of C in minor, and then others could be E minor if you wanted, or you can set them to all be the same. So ultimately, you can change a bit of that, but not the key. I'm going to apologize right now for all the coughing. I was sick before I left on my trip, stayed sick on my trip because of lack of sleep, and then talking endlessly for the whole time I was there. I have this dry cough that is just hanging on. I can't wait to get rid of it. But anyway. All right, let's see. Hey, I caught the stream. Yes, you did. My MKII is showing up in the next couple of hours. Awesome. You are going to love it. Oh, it just arrived. Perfect timing. Awesome. Well, most of what we're talking about here won't apply to your MKII because we're just talking about the new functions, but I've got plenty of streams to talk about the MKII, so feel free to check out any of those. Let's see here. MK2 looks dope, but you'll enjoy the MKII for sure. Absolutely. It's amazing. I'm joining a few minutes late. Pre-ordered mine, sold the 1.1, patiently waiting. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's if you want these performance functions, it's a pretty amazing sequencer. Let's see. MK1 should be perfect. I'm only planning to sequence MC101 with it, so 4 tracks is plenty. Yeah, and again, one of the things with the MK1 is that it's not really 4 tracks, it's 4 sequencers. And the sequencers can be multi-track, which is 8 sequencers or 8 tracks in one, or they can be, in the stochastic and the matricial, they have different numbers of tracks as well. So it's not always just one sequencer equals 1 track. So there's ways to expand that out. You could have it up to 32 tracks in the original one if you had them all as multis. Let's see. Honestly, didn't expect it to be this big. Yeah, it's pretty sturdy. Yes, it's a modal transposing tool. Yes, it is, which is pretty cool. And another thing that's cool, and as we get into some of the other functionality, the other functions move with that, which is pretty cool in the performance side of things. Sorry. Going into the mod, again, going into the mod section, you have 8 modulation lanes per sequencer. So it means you have 64 modulation lanes. You can set these to CC messages, set these to go output to wherever you want, send those out via MIDI, via the split, out to up to 96 different destinations. So there's a lot of possibilities of what to do with the modulation. I'm not going to go too deep into that today because I want to cover more of the performance modes, but just know that there's now 8 sequencers with 8 mod destinations per sequencer. So pretty cool. Let's see. Next is Gen and then Flow. 2 different interesting ways to perform. So Gen is kind of, it takes the place of the some of the Euclidean stuff. So for example, if you've got something, let's go to track 2. And let's just do something here. So we can start to add pulses just like you would. So we've got this at 16 steps long. You can add pulses. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can see using Euclidean math, it tries to space them out as equally as you can. Oftentimes the number of pulses doesn't divide evenly into the number of steps, and that's where you get some really interesting things. So if we had, like, let's say we have a length of 12 and we have 5 pulses that doesn't divide evenly, then you end up something like this. So you can get all sorts of interesting stuff. And then you can have, additional things with the generative side of this. So you can have percentages and movements. So it's a different way to be able to do random generation, but keeping your original groove the same. Now, if you add something in, so it's no longer, the stochastic math thing, you can still do the generative bits with this. So you can, one thing that's, sorry, not stochastic, Euclidean. So another thing that's cool with this is with a lot of Euclidean sequencers, you're locked into the number of steps to pulses. And with this, you can use that as a starting point, and then you can add or subtract steps or pulses as you want. So it does make it an interesting way to generate melodic stuff that it wouldn't necessarily be on other stuff. In this section, you also have things like ties and offsets and things like that. So the generative section is interesting and fun to mess around with, coming up with ideas really, really super quick. And there's a lot of other generative stuff that we'll talk about here in a minute, because I think there's some others that are much more interesting in the performance idea. Next, we have flow, which is this button down here. So flow is kind of like fill on a lot of machines. So like on the electron boxes, you can use the what's the button? I can't remember what it's called, as the fill button. And you can set things to only occur when that button is pressed, or only occur if it's a not fill function, so it only occurs until the button is pressed, and then when you press it, that thing doesn't happen anymore. Flow acts that way, but the difference between flow and fill is that fill tends to be sequencer events. So let's say you have a clap, and then you have every step set as a fill, and if you press it, you get constant claps. So it tends to be sequencer events, where the flow can be all sorts of parameters from within the device. So some of these functionalities that we're talking about as far as generative things, and some of the performance things that I'll show you in just a second, the repeats and accumulator, those can be set as flow functions as well. So when you press flow, sometimes they'll happen just as a function of flow or not, or like the not flow. And then you also have the ability to set probabilities for a lot of the functionality. So you can come up with some really cool things if you do like a repeat, like what we'll talk about in a second, that happens only when you press flow, and then with the parameter, with the probability of 40% of the time. So then when you press flow, it's only going to happen 40% of the time. When flow is off, it won't happen at all. And so you can combine these things to create a whole bunch of really interesting variation in the stuff that you're making. So also very cool. Let's see here. If you use mult on sequence 1 for all 8 of your drum tracks, can't you get up all 8 of the gate outs on just the first sequence? You could, if your drums that you were sequencing on there were all in modular, and every single one of them was a separate device. This is set up so that with the 8 CV and 8 gates, that's how much you have that can go directly to modular. Now, with 96 outputs of MIDI, if you had a really huge system with, let's say you had 8 different drum modules that were all going to become your drum machine in here, you could just include a module in your case that's a MIDI to CV converter, and then you plug one of those 6 MIDI outputs into it, and that can give you up to another 16 MIDI outs. So then you could send that to a whole bunch of different devices. So yes, that would be the case if you had that many drums that were each individual modules in a modular. But the way this would be set up for a lot of people would be if you used a drum machine, each one of those tracks would go to a different MIDI destination rather than a different CV or gate destination. And so that's easy to do because you have 96 of those. So you can send them, you could send out to a whole bunch of different drum machines and have multiple multi-tracks. If all 8 sequencers were all multiples, that would give you 64 tracks, and you have 96 MIDI outputs plus 8 CV and gate. So lots of opportunities to go out. But yeah, there's definitely some decision making just because there's so many options to decide what do you want to control. Like for a setup like mine where I have modular and hardware, there's a lot of decision making as to what do I want to control via CV and what do I want to control via MIDI. So like, for example, in this setup, I have the Oxycoral being controlled by MIDI because that's 8 channels. And if I control it via CV, I can only use 1 channel at a time. Via MIDI, I can use multiples. The Polycinematic, very easy to control with MIDI or to control with CV gate, but I choose to control it via MIDI because that frees up CV gate that I can use for other stuff. It will also be a case where if you wanted to use a whole bunch of that modulation, so for example, you can create LFOs within here by drawing on the screen and create your own custom LFOs. You could send that out via MIDI to a MIDI to CV converter and then patch that CV. So then you've got, you have potentially 96 LFOs that you could send to different places in your case if you just have the right hardware conversion. So lots of different ways to set it up. One of the things that I love about devices like this is it's not just one workflow that you have to love it or leave it. This is, you can totally customize it to your own workflow, which is really cool. Being able to decide how you want each sequencer to act, how you want each, even like in a multi, you can have, these 2 rows could be CV, then these 3 rows could be different MIDI outputs, then you could have a CV one. So they can all go to different destinations. And then everything, once you have it mapped out and connected, then it's this really simple workflow to control everything from one screen, and then you don't have to think about those connections anymore. But at the beginning for the setup, there's for sure quite a bit of thought that has to go into how do you want to use it? Like where do you want those things set up to and going to? So let's see. Hey, what's going on, Unknown Artist? Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Again, any questions you have, please feel free to ask. So let's go back to our sequencer 2, which is our Basto pizza here. And I'll show you one of the cooler functions or some of the cooler functions. Let's just do, 3 notes. And just the normal of those 3 notes, this would be this. But now if I go into, I have to remember how to do this. Hold the sequencer, hold this and go to, yes, 3 putt steps. That gets us to the accumulator. So the accumulator, and I'm trying to wrap my head around this right now, so forgive me if I get some of the terminology wrong, is a way to generate variations on the notes that you have here. Well, let's actually start with 1 at first, so it's more clear. So I can see how much I want to vary this by semitones, the way that I want it to go. So you can see there's a pattern to it. So it's just varying that 1 step. You can change that direction. Okay, and then you can decide how far you want that to move semitone wise, up and down. So how far you want it to move within that. And then it keeps track of where it's going. And you can set this by individual triggers, or you can set it to all or individual steps, right? Which is pretty cool. And then you've got the percentage. So you can decide when you want this to happen, 50% of the time, or the second 2 of 3. So this gives you your probability as well that you would have in steps like, say, for example, in an electron device. Okay, so that's one performance function where you can get some variation per tone. So then if you put in more tones, so you see you're only getting variation in this first one that's here. But if you were to put that variation on all of these in differing amounts, so you're getting, it's generating generative ideas within the notes that you've selected for this to use. Let's just do a couple so you can hear these. So we'll go back to just like the straight notes, and then I want to talk about, actually we'll just do one again. Then I want to talk about the other new kind of performative thing that you can do by step here, which is repeats. So I can set repeats on this. So oftentimes you think about repeats like ratchets, and you can say, I want it to be this many repeats in that. And they go pretty quick, and they go all the way to the, until they're done. However many of those repeats you wanted to have. Here you can set the number of repeats. So you can hear there's 2 or 3 or 4. And you hear they're super, super fast because we have the duration set at 1 step. So all 4 of those repeats are happening in 1 single step. But if I stretch those out over 3 steps, or stretch them out over, I don't know, 11 steps, I'm actually going to set the end of this much longer. Now it's set 4 repeats over 9 steps. What if we did 15 over 9 steps? Or 7 over 9 steps? So 7 over 9 steps is going slightly slower than 1 per step. So if you put a kick with this, it gives you a really interesting variation of timing, right? Let's say we made the number of repeats, I don't know, 5. Back to 8 here. Or then if we go to 9, it's going to be very clean. Right? So you see that it happens 1 per step on 16th notes. But if you take the number of repeats down again, you end up with some interesting variation. Now, there's other things that you can do with the repeats too, besides the number and the duration of time. One thing you can do is change the velocity. So you can make the velocity go up or down. So if you want it to go up or down, I actually don't have the velocity connected very well right now to do this, but you understand what I'm saying? Like you can have it start quiet and get louder, have it start loud and get quieter. The other thing that's really cool is you can have them accelerate or decelerate over that same 9 steps. So let's say we want them to accelerate or decelerate. And then we want them to accelerate. And then if you were to take this step and you were to copy that step and then paste that somewhere else, you paste it with those same functions, even though you put it onto a different level. And you'll see they do choke each other. So you see, you can get a lot of cool variation in stuff this way. And then if you were to go into that other level that we were just talking about and add some of that other movement, so you can get a lot of interesting variations that you have a certain amount of control over, but then they're doing some things that are a bit random as well. And that's just with 2 steps. So you can do this with multiple steps, different types of melodies. You could have things all kind of set on 1 note. And then you can start to add in some of those things as well. So adding in some of that change. And then you can copy that. You can change the accumulation to different settings for different ones. And then you can still keep your same bass groove and pattern, and you can have it kind of based on the settings that you put into here, you can have it move away from that bass pattern in differing amounts. Right? And then if you were to take some of these out to make some space, then you can add in some of the repeats. And then you still have things like octave jump. And you can hear that top one's echoing out. If I move this out of the way, it won't choke it. And then I can change the duration. Right, so you see it gives you a whole bunch of different variation within one single step. Okay, so being able to have these things is really interesting, obviously from a performance standpoint, but then you can start to combine things. So you saw it combining like the accumulator and the repeats, but then if you do things like if we've got this playing along, and then we go into that performance mode, and we were to transpose that melody that we're doing right there, you see it transposes it with all of that same functionality, so it doesn't destruct the thing that you're doing. So being able to take something just as simple as that with those different types of dynamic repeats, then adding in the fills from the performance side, adding in the transposition from the performance side, gives you a lot of different ways to play around with relatively simple patterns. So doing this stuff live is obviously where this is at and where it's super interesting. Now you do still have the same functionality that you had before. So if you just wanted to put in some steps and have those play along like on the BIA. And then you can still go into your randomness here, and you still take that density down below 0, and you can just do to pitch. And then let's say we just want a little bit of variation and a little bit of randomness. Change up the range a little more. So you can still do this sort of randomness and random variation that you could always do back at with the Mark I, but then you also again have that ability to go in and now do things like adding repeats. And then we can go in. And you see as it randomizes the pitch of that step where we had the additional things, or the additional performance things, it moves that with those. So then if you were to go in and do, you know, I don't know, accumulator on one of these. And then another. And then you go back and you randomize. You see all of those different, the different effects that you put on those things, the repeats, the accumulator and things, those move as soon as you randomize pitch. So you're still keeping the steps exactly the same. So you still have control over gate, where you're controlling kind of the groove when the things are happening, like when a gate event happens. So it tells you like, you know, do you want it on an offbeat? Do you want it on a downbeat? Wherever you want it. So you have that much control over those. But then with all these other, the other different types of ways that you can modify each individual step, you can add different things to those steps, which then stick with them as they move around. And again, like I mentioned before, if you want to change things, or if you want to, you know, copy something and paste it somewhere else, it copies and pastes with all of those things attached to it, which is cool. So then you can put in a couple and then add variation on the other ones, and it becomes much more complex and evolving. So let's see here. Questions. Again, if you have questions about this, I'm just digging in. So there's plenty of this that I don't know how to do yet. So I'm showing you what I have figured out so far, and there'll be plenty more of these streams about this because it's a crazy deep machine. But if you do have other questions, definitely put them in the chat, and I will be happy to answer them. Let's see here. Though I haven't done too much with the MKI, I think it's a compelling upgrade. It is if these performance things are important to you. And again, these don't make the Mark I any less valuable. It's, you know, if this didn't exist today, that would still be my favorite sequencer. This is just, it has some things that are, I don't know, interesting enough for me to want to make the change and make the upgrade. But yeah. So one other thing to show you too, in the performance mode, so I showed you before, track 1 is set up as a multi. So on track 1, I have kick on the bottom row, which you can see there. And then I have hat on the offbeats. Then I also have the Percon's voice in there as well. So I put those 3 all on one because that's going to be kind of like drums and percussion. And then I'm not using the other channels in that multi for anything as of yet. Then on track 2, I have the Basto Pizza. Again, used to be part of the multi-mode, but now I split it out into its own track so that I can use all of those functions, because those functions I was just showing you, the accumulator and the repeats, those ones, so you can use the repeats in multi-mode, but you can't use the accumulator in multi-mode. So if you want to be able to use the accumulator, you're going to want to move something off into its own sequencer. Now you've got 8 of them, so you can do all kinds of stuff. So again, 2 is the pizza, 3 is the BIA, the one we were just messing with. 4, I have set up as the Erica Synths bass line. Right? So yeah, that's track 4. Then I have track 5 set up as the Noisite Warp. And again, that's broken off into its own sequencer now so that I can do all of those other effects with it. Track 6, I'm sending out via MIDI to the Polycinematic, so I can then do my kind of ravey stab things. Let's see here, I actually don't have track 6 set up yet. So I can send that out to, where do I have it going to? 1B, I believe. Yeah. Dub chords and rave stabs with the Polycinematic. And then the oxychoral I have on track 7, which is set up as a multi because the oxychoral has 8 tracks. It's 8 voice multi-timbral. So each one of the lanes of the multi can be a different voice going out to the choral. And again, I don't have this one set up yet, so I will just do it now. So let's say we want this to go to, this is where I had to change around my numbers because normally on the bottom I was using 1. So now I'll make this 8, go to 8C. And we'll make this one up here, oops. We'll make this one up here, go to 1C. So that's going to one of the voices of the oxychoral. And then you can set up each one of these to go to a different voice of that. So that gets me basically 8 melodic voices in one sequencer. Yeah, on sequencers, oh, that should have been 7. Anyway, I set it up on 8, doesn't really matter. I can go back and change it. And then sequencer 8, I actually kind of freed this one up because, sorry, this is either going to be for Digitac 2 to be able to sequence some melodic stuff in there and some samples, or as you can see here, I have the 1010 black box, and I'm kind of trying this out with the black box because I may put a 1010 bit box in my case to reduce down again the size of the gear that I'm traveling with. And if I use the bit box, it only has 8 tracks instead of 16 with the black box. And so that gives me 8 voices here again that I can use. I can put samples in there that are one shots, and I can use those because like with the Digitac, for example, I'm using some 909 samples like claps and hats and things that I like from the 909. So I could put those into the bitbox and sequence those from here. Or I could actually send, if we go back to our drum and percussion track, let's say I wanted this to be, clap on this, I could then send this one track of that. I could send this one track of that one out via MIDI. So it would be CC or CV, 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 and then this could be MIDI to track 1 on the bitbox, MIDI to track 2 on the bitbox, MIDI to track 3 on the bitbox, and then go back into the other one, and I can have a whole bunch of other things that are going out via MIDI to the black box because it would have its own dedicated MIDI track. So I would have 16 MIDI lanes that I could send to that. So it would give me quite a bit of control over that, even if it was in the case, and I could still sequence everything from here. So I'm experimenting around with that to see which one I want to use, but that's kind of what's going to go on 8. So for right now, I'm just playing with that on the black box. So that I think will be my setup. So drums and percussion on 1, Basso Pizza, BIA, bassline, warp, polycinematic, 8 voices of the choral, and then 8 tracks within the black box. So that's why when you go into multi-mode, these are all my drums with mutes from that first multi. These are those individual instruments, and then these would be the 8 voices of the choral that I could mute those voices individually here, and these would be the 8 tracks in the black box that I could all mute from here as well. So that's why the performance mode is so cool, is because it kind of brings everything all together in one spot. So you can do, once everything's set up and once you decide on the routing, because you have so many options, so many flexible options about how to do the routing, once you decide, then you don't have to think about it anymore, and it just kind of pulls everything together. So I don't have to think when I'm on track 1 that it's like these are CV and then these ones would be MIDI. Once they're set up, it's just like, this is my drum lane. And when I want to clap, I go here. And I don't really care if that clap is coming from the bitbox or the Digitact or the black box or a module or whatever. It's just in its place in the sequencer. So that way it keeps the performance workflow pretty clean. So anyway, that's one of the things we talk about in my performance course, which I'll give a little plug for that here because it's a big sale going on right now. It's 50% off. So if you go to circlelive.com/courses, one of the things we talk about a lot is a thing I like to call the 50% rule, which is that when you're performing live, you're going to be 50% dumber than you are in your studio. So to try to dumb down your workflow. So do all of this setup stuff first, get everything routed in a way that makes total sense to the dumber version of you. So that way, when you're performing live, all you have to think about is drums on track 1. You don't have to think about any of the routing. And that's one of the things I really love about the Oxy is if I had, 3 different sequencers in my modular case sequencing different voices, and then Electron boxes sequencing themselves, and then another synth with its own internal sequencer, and I'm trying to juggle all of those things, it becomes a lot more complicated than I want it to be when I'm playing live. I want to try to keep everything as simple as possible. So this way it ties everything together into one workflow so that I can then control it all from here. So yeah, that's why I do it this way. Anyway, let's see here. Anyone use the app to update the firmware? Shows loading latest release and has been for a while. So yes, the firmware should be able to be updated soon. I have a beta version of it that we're using to update the firmware on this. And so once it is 100% completed, then I think that will go live. I think they didn't want anybody updating with firmware that wasn't quite ready yet. But there's a new app, and that's what this will be in. The new app for the Mark II allows you to do a lot more organization because you have the SD card. So you potentially have a lot more files, files to organize. So you can put unlimited projects into the SD card, and then you can load 20 of them into the immediate memory to be able to be loaded quickly. But you've got all of them in the card. So having that app is really handy to be able to manage all of those, and also managing things like the grooves that you put in there, the groove pools, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's a new app, and it's very handy. I don't know if you've used the new app for the Oxy Choral, which is also very cool because one of the big drawbacks with the Choral was that it was kind of a pain to set up on the device. A lot of button combos and figuring out what different colored lights meant and stuff like that. Where now with the app, you can pop the SD card out of the Choral. You can set up all your parameters and all of your setup in the app, load it onto the SD card, and just pop that back in. And then you've got everything all set and ready to go. So very, very handy, that one. So what else? What other questions you guys have? Pop those in the chat. And it can be about I just wanted to show you the Oxy because it was kind of the new, the new thing. But sorry. If you have other questions about Superbooth, gear that I saw there, about the tour I did, any of the gigs, traveling with gear, travel nightmares, any of the people that I saw over there, people that I was hanging out with, any questions at all, please feel free to pop those in the chat. Happy to answer anything that you're curious about. Let's see. Okay, batteries are still good on the things that I had unplugged the cords from. But anyway, having this setup like this gives us a lot of options to be able to play things in a way that is really intuitive and yeah, really intuitive, and it's like centralizes everything all into one place, and also very performative. So being able to do all of that stuff here is pretty cool. See as well, once you've got something that you're playing around with, then again you go to this performance mode and you've got things. So anyway, all kinds of cool things that you can do with this. I'm just experimenting around with it, but I wanted to touch on those things first and foremost today. I'm going to go much deeper into this machine later on, but yeah, this is the next iteration of the Oxy One, the Mark II. Should be available soon. I know they're assembling them now, so they should be another pre-order everywhere. I think a lot of the pre-orders have sold out already, though, unfortunately. But yeah, the first batch should be going out relatively soon. So hopefully you guys will be able to get your hands on one if you're so inclined. I'm very thankful to Oxy that they sent me home with this from Superbooth, so that I could mess around with it and beta test and find bugs and get those worked out before you guys get them in your hands, so you won't have to deal with any of that stuff, which is great. Yeah, so that's it for this one. So if you have questions, definitely pop them in the chat. That was the stuff that I wanted to cover on this, but I'm happy to cover anything else that you would like to see. So anything on this or the trip or Superbooth or anything. I will say from Superbooth, first and foremost, the biggest thing for me with Superbooth is hanging out with the people. All of my friends that I usually only see at these conferences, particularly some of them only at Superbooth every year. So it was always fun. A lot of my fellow YouTubers all stayed in the same hotel. So it was fun to get to, I spent a lot of time with Synth Dad. Mark is a great guy, and we end up hanging out together a lot at all the shows. Bo from Bo Beats was there as well. Cameron from Venus Theory, Jorb, who else? Starsky Carr, a few others. We were all kind of staying at the same place. So it was nice to hang out and have dinner with those guys and chat about all sorts of things and have some drinks on the patio. And that was very cool to discuss what we all saw. And it's cool because everybody kind of sees things from a different take. I mean, we all do different types of music. We're all looking at the gear in a different way. Some are really experienced keyboard players, so they're looking for like the keyboard sense. That's not me, so I'm looking more at the things that are working for techno live performance with sequencers, definitely leaning towards modular, which is not what some of them do. So it was always kind of cool to get everybody's take on everything that you saw at Superbooth. So that was definitely fun to hang out with all those guys. And then see some of my other friends that live in Berlin, like Ura. It was nice to see him. He came to the workshop that I did at Schneidersladen in Berlin, which was great. My friend Maydon, spent some time in the studio with her, which was amazing. She just moved to a new studio space, which is awesome, and spent some time there jamming. It was good to see Oscar from Underdog on this trip, both at his place in Brussels, and we played a gig together in Brussels, and then he also came to Superbooth for the first time, and so it was cool to have him there. We hung out with Maydon at her studio the last day, and it was good to spend a bunch of time with Oscar as well. And then, of course, all the people that I saw at the different gigs as well. The gig that I played at Urban Spree in the city was with a bunch of my other friends. So that was with Honey Smack and Tomo and Analog Kitchen and Vamp Acid and who else was there? Ruffian and Joseph Koons and Alex 106 and the whole gang. So it was really fun. It was great to see those guys and get to play a show, get to hang out and talk a bunch. Was awesome. Listen to their sets. Everybody played fantastically. So that was really great. Yeah, and get to see a lot of the new gear. I mean, there was a bunch of stuff that was really cool and interesting. And then there was a bunch of stuff that I was like, yeah, that's cool and all, but not necessarily for me. But for other people, it might be exactly what they're looking for. But yeah, definitely my favorite, probably favorite thing that I saw in the whole show, besides the Oxy One. I mean, this was a huge hit. The booth was packed the whole time because everybody was really curious about this new upgrade. But besides this, I think the next best thing that I saw was probably the Noisite Drop controller, which is by far the smartest MIDI controller I've ever seen. The functionality was pretty crazy, and it was even better in person than I've seen in any of the videos online, which it looks pretty cool online, but in person it's amazing. What it can actually do, to bring together control of a hardware live set, very much like what the MKII does with sequencing, that does with full-blown MIDI control. So being able to have hands-on control over all your parameters in one space. So if you have multiple hardware synths, or if you have something like the black box that is deep, but it's a lot of menus, so you would like go into individual pages and then go to the info and then go to that page and then switch to this side and then change that knob. With the drop controller, you can assign these knobs to different pages and then you can save snapshots. And so that way you've got them however you need them in your controller, very easily accessible. And then it has a lot of performance functions, very much like the MKII, where you can, there's functions that are designed specifically, particularly, I was trying to say those two words together, for performing live. So things that add to a live performance, that allow you to control certain things while other things are happening automatically, so that you don't have to have 6 pairs of arms trying to make everything happen all at one time. So very, very, very interesting controller. I cannot wait to get my hands on that one. It was yeah, definitely really good. I also loved some of the new modules from Shachmat. I got the Bishop's Miscellany Mark II, which I'm going to be messing around with. It's something that goes between your sequencer and your modules to be able to morph your sequences. So adding in the ability to morph things within the MKII with the way the Bishops can also morph sequences, I think is going to be really interesting. But I also got to play around with some of their new modules. Obviously the Ballista, which is their voice that I'm really waiting for, because I got to play with the prototype last year and loved it, and have been eagerly waiting for it since then. So when that one comes out, it will definitely be going in the case. They also showed a new prototype of a snare module that's called the Lancer's Lash, and it sounded so good. Very much like the battering ram and the Archer's rig are kind of top shelf for kick drum and hats. The Lancer's Lash is right there with snares. And it doesn't have to be a snare module, which I liked as well. Kind of like with the Archers, you can make it do a lot of interesting percussive things. The Lancer's Lash was the same way. So it's definitely got some great sounding snare engines, but you can divide those out and then you can pitch it different ways and you can make it be all sorts of different types of percussion. So I really liked that one a lot. And then also, what else? I played with the Ohm Force Boom kick drum, which was really cool. If I wasn't already so in love with the battering ram, I might go for that one, although it's significantly larger. It's a wavetable based kick drum, so it had some really cool aggressive sounding kicks, but then you can change that into anything, and there's a lot of control over it because it's wavetable. So not only do you have control within the wavetable, but then you also have your typical subtractive synthesis control as well. And then it had a module that would attach to that, which is basically their kick rumble, and unfortunately can only be used with their kick. You can't take audio in from another kick, which I think would be super handy. But this rumble is a multi-tap delay with some other effects, and you have individual controls where you can change up the timing of the different delays in order to get really interesting kind of funky rhythms with your rumble. So you can make the rumble of your kick really cool. I was using it with kind of tom sounds, like more like 909 toms, and then putting it through this rumble, and as it goes through the delay and the other processing, it was kind of like a tom with rumble, and you could get some really cool, very funky percussion going with it. So definitely worth looking at if you're looking for something like that and you have space in your case. Yeah, it was a good one. And then of course, I spent a ton of time with the guys from Morph Modular, the ones that make my case. This case, as some of you may know that have watched this channel for a little while, this case is a prototype of their new case, and I got to see the actual new case at Superbooth. Hopefully I'll be getting one of those soon so I can actually walk you through what it does. But the biggest difference is the new case has a whole bunch of connectivity on the case to the exterior. Sorry. So there's 8 balanced outputs, 1/4-inch outputs from the case, and those you can attach from the back of modules so that it's compatible with Bufaco and IntelliGel. So if you've got those types of things that work with the Bufaco cases and the IntelliGel cases, they'll also work with this one. And then it also has these 2 circular holes in each one, like 2 in the bottom, 2 in the top boat, and they have swappable inserts. So that can be for MIDI. So if you have a MIDI module in your case and you want to be able to connect DIN and then have that be a breakout, kind of like the IntelliGel stuff does, you can do that. Or you can set it up with USB, and they have it set so that it can be USB power and really stable USB power to power external devices. And then the one that I was interested with is he was talking about doing an XLR output, and then he's designing a module for the case that will basically be a DI box that goes inside your case. So you can patch your main out to that in the case and then just connect XLR outs to your case itself. So for traveling, it's really handy. You wouldn't have to carry an extra DI box. And that way you have the option, no matter what type of connection you have at a gig that you're going to play, you can either do 1/4-inch TRS outputs, balanced outputs, or XLRs out. So it gives you a lot of connectivity to go out of your case if you're playing live, and still with the case that closes down just like this one. The other thing that I love too is the screws on the sides of the hinges for the new one have these kind of like knurly style large screws that you can unscrew with your hands. So you could get to a gig with it set just like I have it here, which, let me switch the view. So just like this, so where you've got it open, and then you can undo the screws on the side and you can lay the top boat flat. So the 2 would be one behind the other, so the audience can see what you're doing. Because one of the drawbacks, like these cases are super handy for travel because you can just close them up like this and they stay patched, and then you travel with them and then you open them back up and you're ready to play. The problem is that the audience can't see what you're doing. And that's such a huge part of live performance, is for the audience to be able to watch the actual making of the music. So to be able to undo that and lay that top boat flat when you've got the space for it is a really interesting thing. So I'm excited for all those things, all the connectivity, the slightly new design, some new switches and things like that. So yeah, it's a very cool case. So I'm looking forward to that when it comes out. So what else? What other questions do you guys have? Let's see, not much going on in the chat here today. I thought there would be tons of questions with this being about the Oxy and Super Booth, but it seems like everyone has seen what they need to see from Super Booth, I guess, with all the other videos that are out there. There's a ton. Let's see here, just to update the chat to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, so yeah, that's that. What else? There was a fun trip. Some really fun gigs. I got to play May Day in Berlin, which was a ton of fun. Played for about 2,000 people, which was a good time. Outdoor party in a park. We were playing in a boat, and we were on the boat with a sound system broadcasting out to all the people on the shore in the park, which was a lot of fun. Live stream in Brussels, which you can see online. I just posted it on socials today. Gimmick Radio, which was really fun as well. I did that one with Oscar from Underdog. We played together. It was cool. It was the first time we ever played together, and it was a lot of fun. We had a blast. And then a bunch of other gigs in Berlin during Super Booth, including at Super Booth, and then in the city at Urban Spree, and then another live stream there. So yeah, lots of fun had in Berlin and Brussels, and train trips back and forth, and delayed luggage and all sorts of things. But sorry again for all the coughing. Let's see. And as I mentioned before, big push right now on my courses, because I didn't do a course for May because I knew I was going to be traveling a bunch and didn't want to commit to the coaching sessions. But I have the June and July courses are now both the signups are open for both of those on my website. So on circlelive.com/courses. And right now I'm doing a special for Superbooth where the first 5 people signing up for each one of the courses get 50% off. The next 5 people get 40% off. The next 5 people get 30% off. So I think there's one spot left at 50% off. So if you want that, jump on it right away. Then it will go to 40%. Still a great deal. It includes 50 videos, 8 group coaching sessions, 1 individual one-on-one session for an hour, and weekly feedback on your live performances, and access to the group, which the group was really cool. At Superbooth, there was about, I don't know, a dozen people that had taken the course that were at Superbooth for the first time. They ended up all hanging out together and creating this cool little group, and they would go out to the parties at night together. They came to my shows. They were going around together checking out gear, and it turned into this real kind of human connection via the course for a bunch of people that would probably have never met otherwise. And so that was really a beautiful thing, and I was super excited and inspired by them. And that's why when I came back, I wanted to do a big discount to try to get as many people in as I could to the courses so that we could keep that ball moving of keeping people connecting like as human beings over music rather than just always being online and live streams and Zoom calls and all that stuff. Let's see here. Have you heard of the God Eater module? Yes. It is, everybody was raving about the pedal. They do have a module. I guess the pedal has a bit more functionality. A lot of people are really excited. It's kind of a distortion saturation module. And then it's got some functionality where it changes things rhythmically as well. I know Oscar was very into it. I didn't get to play with it very much. But everybody that I knew that tried it really liked it. It was one of the big hits of the show. So yeah, I would definitely check that out if you're interested. Quick question about the workflow with Electron gear. Can you trig a step on the Oxy, but still have a conditional trig with some P-locks on the Electron in the same time? Use the best of both. You cannot. So the thing is that I've messed around with this a bunch, and having I think what you're talking about is having like trigless trigs in the electrons. Those only work with internal sequencers. So you can't have something externally MIDI sequencing because then you're just basically triggering the sound engine of that thing. So the device itself doesn't know that it's had a trigger. And so you need that trigger within the device in order for trigless trigs to work. So I have messed around with that, and it's not something that works, unfortunately. Let's see. Morph case looks surprisingly similar to Amalgamod. Yes, the hinge is pretty similar. Just the way it opens up and then it closes and that hinge becomes the handle. Those look pretty similar. Other than that, the cases are incredibly different. Totally different materials that they're made out of. Different finish. Like the Amalgamod case is kind of a smooth black on a fairly thin metal in the case, and the smooth black shows a lot of like scratches and wear. This one is kind of a rougher, almost like a baked on type finish. I don't even know how they do it. But this one, I beat the crap out of this, and it doesn't have a single scratch on it anywhere. So that was pretty cool. Also the way that the power supplies connect. With this one, you connect one power supply to one boat, and then it has a little jumper that takes it to the other boat, which is really handy. And on the new ones, like on this prototype, that it doesn't have a lot of those things that I was mentioning that the new ones will have, but the new ones have a ton of features that the Amalgamods don't have. So like all of the 1/4 inch TRS outs, being able to have XLR outs, having all those inputs and outputs. They're creating now a whole ecosystem of modules for the morph cases that connect via those internal connectors. The morph also has a whole bunch of stuff that they've done with their power supplies internally. So the bus boards, I know they're set up differently, so you can have different connections if you choose. Like if this isn't a big deal, there's nothing special about how you would set it up. But if you choose, you can have different powers, like different power connectors, like a different circuit for digital versus analog modules. So if there's a power draw, or if they're getting hum, or if there's any kind of thing, you can change the way they're connected, and there's different connectors for each, so they run on different circuits. You can set it to boot up in sequence. So if you have big modules that draw a lot of power that may trip power supplies, you can have this boot up so that the different modules boot up in sequence to keep that one big pull of draw from happening at the same time. So that was also very interesting. I think you mentioned the power supply, but having the supply for both things off of one brick is very cool. Being able to detach the hinge and lay it flat is also something unique to these guys. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff, on the surface, when you just see the handle and the hinge part of the handle, they look relatively similar. But as soon as you get past that, they're completely different. This one has things like, I don't know if you can see, it's probably if you can see here, but there's little like notches, there's like little feet that come out from this. So when you have your case closed and you're holding it with the handle and you set it down, it has little feet that it sits on instead of sitting just on the flat part of the case and scratching or, letting stuff get inside the case or whatever. So like little details like that were really, I think really well thought out with this. They have their own power supplies internally now, which is very cool. They worked with their own manufacturer to create those, which is great. And then, like I said, they have a whole ecosystem of modules. So they'll have the DI module. There's a bunch of different outputs. He was showing there a module that's a connector for Circlon. So if you're using a Circlon with your modular, you can have one cable connection and then leave that patched, kind of like you do with the Oxy pipe. So you can have everything patched out to your case and have a single cable that connects to a Circlon connector. What else did they have? The new cases, one of the biggest differences also with the Amalgamod compared with this one is Amalgamod does not make a 6U84 HP. And that was one of the big deciding factors for me getting the Morph was this one actually fits inside a rolling carry-on bag to be able to use this as carry-on luggage. The 12U84, the 12U104, which these guys make and which Amalgamod makes, can be your carry-on, but only if you use their bag because it's really thin, because the case itself is basically carry-on sized, whereas this one fits inside a roller, like a rigid roller that is carry-on size. So it was very handy for travel to be able to have this, because when you're carrying a case that big and you're putting it in a shoulder strap and going through airports and stuff, it's a nightmare. So being able to have this inside a roller was amazing. And you have to have the 12U84 in order to fit inside the roller. So 84 HP fits, but 104 does not. So that was one of the biggest differences. So let's see. Does Morph plan to make a 104 14U? Yes, that they were actually showing that at the event. So if you look, if you go to their social media, go to their Instagram or whatever, you'll see pictures of the 14U 104 that they were showing there. He also mentioned there's going to be a 14U 84, which I'm going to try to see if I can still fit in a roller if I detach the handle, because now that it has those screws that makes the handle really easy to detach, I might still be able to fit it into a roller with the extra 1U row on each one of them. In which case, then I could add in a bunch of their 1U utility modules, which would be great to be able to just have that I/O connectivity with the case for MIDI and they're going to do a 1U version of their DI module. So being able to have that in there would be cool. And yeah, so we'll see. But yes, they're planning on doing, not only doing 1U rows, but they were also showing a fair number of 1U modules that they're going to be manufacturing. So they're moving from just being a case manufacturer to being a case manufacturer that also has modules that interface with the case, which is really cool. I was very happy to see, and they seem like they're great quality and really good stuff. So that was very interesting. So yes, there will be a 104-14 and an 84-14, which would be interesting. And we'll see how those work for carry-on stuff. But being able to take this as a carry-on was amazing. And good thing I was able to, because my luggage was delayed, so I had to check it. I would have missed out on one of my shows, the bigger one in Berlin. I wouldn't have been able to do because my luggage hadn't arrived yet. So it's great to be able to do the carry-on, and that's why this 84 HP size for me is ideal. So we'll see if I switch to a 14 from a 12, but it'll stay 84 and not go to 104. What else? Anyone else? Any other questions about any of this stuff or Superbooth or anything? Anything fun? All right. Or about the courses. Definitely ask about those. So yeah, I don't do sponsored videos. I mean, like, this may seem like it because we're talking about the Oxy, and they did give this to me, but it's not a sponsorship and they're not paying me anything. And this isn't like an ad for Oxy. I just wanted to walk through it because it's a new device that I keep getting a lot of questions about. And yeah, I mean, for those of you who've watched these, you know that the only gear that you'll ever see on this stream is gear that I actually use. And so often I get sent things from companies and then I try it out and I don't really like it, so I send it back, and you never see that. That's why I don't put things up here just to talk about. And if I do talk about something on the stream, it's because it's actually something that I like and that I'm using. And so that way I can show you how I'm using it and what I like about it, rather than, the paid product placement type stuff. So yeah, so that's why this was given to me by Oxy, but as part of the beta test program. And it wasn't in exchange for anything online or anything like that. They don't even know I'm doing this. So this is just me. Let's see. Any thoughts on the hex drum? Yes, I do have thoughts on the hex drum. So the Ericsson's hex drum, which is basically all of the hex inverter drum modules that they did with Ericsson's before the hex inverter went out of business. It's all of those modules built into a case that's about the size of a vintage 909, or like an RD9 Behringer, like about that size. First impression, sorry again. First impression of the hex drum is it is beautiful. When you see it, it looks super sleek. The black with yellow looks awesome. It really, really looks very cool. The workflow is super familiar as far as, the clicky button 909 style sequencer, although it does have parameter locking and some other stuff you can do, which is pretty cool. If you've used the hex inverter modules, you'll feel right at home because they're kind of divided up by module as well. They have slightly different names, but it's basically the two different kick drums that they had are both in there. And then there's what was the other one called? The machine something. Anyway, all the different modules are represented. Now, playing it, the workflow was easy to understand at first. There was a couple little awkward things where the labels for whatever module you were selecting with one of the steps, when you hit select, then you could choose what module you wanted to sequence or what what voice you wanted to sequence. The labels were underneath the steps of the sequencer. And if you were sitting on a desk, you could see it really well. But if you were looking at it from the top, it kind of disappeared. And especially if it was on an angle, you wouldn't be able to see them at all. And so that was a little awkward to be able to figure out like where I was each time. Then sound-wise, it was a little flat. It sounded a little dull, although in fairness, I didn't realize when I was messing around with it at first that it had a master drive, which I think would have really fattened everything up a lot. So I wasn't using that. Sorry. So because of that, I thought it was good. There wasn't anything that like blew me away, but I will say, price-wise, it sounds like it's going to be 1,100 euros. And so at that price point, it's significantly less than, say, an electron analog rhythm or something like that. So it's a good value for what it is. The voices sounded good, would sound great if I would have been using the drive, I'm sure. And the workflow was easy to understand and easy to pick up really quick. So I wished I would have had more time with it. I would love to get one to use. So if Erica Sense, anybody's watching me, I would love to get one to use, to really spend some time with it and mess with the individual outs and see what I could do processing wise to get those to sound a little bit more like what I would like them to sound like, and really play around with the voices a bit. It was hard there because when you put on the headphones to use it in the little room they had, you only had a few minutes and there's a lineup of people waiting to try it because it was a new release. And so you didn't really get a chance to kind of sit with it and fall in love with it, which is what I wanted to do. So I would love to spend some more time with it, but I wasn't able to. So it was cool. And again, like I said, beautiful, amazing price point, and easy to understand workflow. So very playable. And besides that, I would like to mess around with the voices to get them sound a bit more like I would want them to. But yeah, in general, it was very cool. So let's see. Didn't realize you had so much gear overall. Yeah, a bit too much sometimes. Let's see. That have P-locks on all knobs. I don't remember, actually. I would have to look that up. I can't remember if it had perimeter locks on all the knobs. I feel like it did. I feel like it worked just like the Percons in that where you could hold down a step and adjust things and have that be per step. So I believe so, but I'm not 100%. Hey, what's up, Christopher? Need to sleep. Yeah, it's getting late for you. Water. Yeah, it's not just water. My voice is shot and I've been coughing because I'm sick, and talking straight for 3 weeks while I was in Europe and getting very little sleep has led me to this. So hopefully this will be gone by the time I do my next live stream. We'll see. Let's see, what else? Any other questions? Superbooth or Oxy One Mark II or gear or travel or gigs or courses or any of that stuff. As I mentioned, I don't do paid sponsor videos. I don't do sponsorships of any kind. So the only way I kind of sponsor my own channel is with the courses I sell. So if you want to support the channel, take a course, and that way you get something really valuable out of it and it helps me pay the bills. So that would be great. And like I said, right now, I was really inspired by Superbooth to start the courses a year ago. And this year I was re-inspired by Superbooth because of seeing my students hang out together and seeing the connection that it gave people from all over the world to come together like in a human thing rather than just online. So because of that, I really wanted to blast it out and give a great discount. So right now it's 50% off for any of the courses that I have. So jump on those if you're interested, because it would be, it'll be a big boost for getting these next 2 months kind of filled up. And that way we can have a whole bunch more people doing this super fun live performance and production thing. Let's see, favorite takeaway from Superbooth. For me, the best thing about Superbooth is hanging out with the people. So that was the best. I mean, the conversations, the meals we had, the shows we saw, the music we played together was always the best. Gear wise, I think the Oxy One Mark II was the top, like kind of best in show thing. I think a close second was the Noisite drop controller. It was pretty amazing. I really enjoyed, actually, we haven't talked about this, but I really enjoyed playing the new 1010 device, the Bento. It was obviously not finished when it was there, so it was missing some of the functionality. Like, it didn't have any master performance effects, which I think is something that was really lacking. But the interface was great. The way you deal with like the sequencer on the screen was cool, because you could sequence from the buttons below or use the screen. And the the screen interface felt kind of like MPC or Machina. Felt like that style, that type of interface. The actual parameters for the synths, I really liked the graphics. It was very clear. It was very, the graphics were really kind of stripped back and streamlined, but looked very good. So yeah, I really enjoyed those. The voices sounded great. The audio quality was great. The screen was very responsive. It was nice having the larger screen and buttons and knobs to be able to interact with it. And yeah, I think it's going to be a really good groove box once it's completed. Like I said, it was still missing some performance effects to actually make it be a performative tool rather than being just kind of a sequencing groove box where you could like make patterns. But if you wanted to actually perform them, like all of the effects are still per channel. And so there's not a way to do macros, and there's not a way to have like a master filter cutoff or something. So that kind of makes it a little bit handicapped for me. But other than that, it felt great. It was about the size of a circuit, or like a circuit tracks. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was great. I love 1010 stuff already. And the difference for me though is, like, I'm used to like the black box and the blue box and stuff where they're metal enclosures and they feel like I can just throw them in my bag and I don't have to worry about anything. And this one was plastic. So that was a little bit of a drawback for me, but it wasn't any worse than any of the other plastic ones that are out there. I just think their stuff that's metal feels extra durable. So that was one thing, but other than that, I mean, it was really cool. And like I said, it sounded really good. That was one of the things that kind of surprised me. It was kind of like when I first tried the Ableton Move, I was really blown away by how good it sounded. And it was the same with the 1010 Bento. It sounded really great. All right, let's see. Hey, Herbie, what's going on? Bummer that you weren't at Superbooth this year. Did you get a chance to check out the IntelliGel Jelly Mix? I did. Super keen to get my hands on one of those when it drops. I would say, I don't want to talk you into or out of anything, but my overall impression of it was that it looks much cooler than it is. It was fine. If you just need something to mix audio signals together, it was fine. The filter sounded fine, like it was fine. It reminded me a lot of that little Zoom mixer that everybody's super keen on right now. And like a sexier version of that, where, you know, rotary controllers and things that feel like more like a small studio mixer rather than a performance mixer. So for me, I mean, you guys know, Herbie, you know me well enough. You know that when I'm looking at stuff, I'm looking at it from a performance standpoint. So for me, it wasn't very interesting because it was not, you know, having the rotary controls, having really limited functional control over things, having it be relatively big for being a relatively small number of tracks and stuff. It didn't blow me away. Looks very sexy. That was a cool thing. Like the industrial design part of it looked really nice. And price point seems nice. I think it's going to be like $650 or $699, something like that. So decent price. But didn't blow me away. It seemed okay, but it seemed like it served a functional purpose. And for me, I think that if you have a bunch of hardware and you're not performing it live, you're probably going to be fine with just a cheap like MKII or Behringer or whatever, like small desktop studio type mixer to actually functionally mix sound together. But if you're going to take your gear out and perform with it, you're going to want something that's more performative, that's more playable than this one is. So for me, it kind of missed the mark there. I'm still waiting for a performance mixer that is not a ginormous DJ mixer, but that has faders like a DJ mixer and sends and returns and things that make it very functionally playable as a centerpiece that you would use for performance, kind of like what I'm using the Exelon mixer for here, where it's something that probably 80% of the time, 75% of the time in performance, my hands are on the mixer doing something, whether it's adjusting levels, whether it's adjusting effect sends and then adjusting that effect that it goes to, whether it's audio mixing, whether it's patching in and doing sidechain through the mixer, all of that stuff. So for me, actually having an interface that I can use as a playable instrument is really important to me. And that mixer didn't feel like that. It reminded me of kind of a cross between the that Zoom one that I was talking about and the Auto OTO or OTTO, I can't remember, instruments, the Baby Sherry, the pink one. It felt kind of like that, like it was in that category, neither of which were super interesting to me for the exact same reasons that I'm talking about. So it would serve the purpose of mixing audio together if that's what you need it to do. But as a performative instrument, I feel like it didn't really hit the mark there because, I'm looking for faders and sends and returns and, clear, useful tools per channel. And that was just, it didn't have the things that I was looking for. So it looked sexy, but for me, it just was not anything I was interested in. So not to turn you off on it. If you want it, absolutely get it. But you asked for my impression. So that was my impression. Let's see here, where are we at? Where are we at? Drop intrigued me. Yes, it was amazing. Upgrade to MKII, I guess. Performance capabilities, MK1 was the only downside. Yeah, this does all those and more, obviously. Fun box. Love meta. Me too. Generous in terms of firmware updates. They are. And I know that the Oxy One Mark I will continue to be supported as long as it can, until they run out of computing power in the chipset. But I know they're going to continue to support that. I know right now all their efforts have been going into getting this up and running and getting this firmware to a point where they're happy for the release. And then I'm sure they'll go right back into doing firmware updates for this and for the Mark I as well. So, yeah. Zoom 16 I'm still using. Yeah. Behringer Wing. No idea. Not a Behringer guy, so I don't know. WMD Performance Mixer MK2 looks sick. Yes, it does. I have it right there. Can you see? Here, I'll move this out of the way, and then I will change the view so you can see where we at. There you go, right there. WMD Performance Mixer Mark II. Right there in the rig. Yes, it is very good also. I love it. It acts similar in a lot of ways to the Exelon. The reason I have the Exelon in my case is because of kind of the ecosystem of expanders. I like to be able to have pre-fader and post-fader outputs connected to the back, which I have over here. Here, I'll switch back to my overhead view. Over here, this I/O module gives me pre-fader and post-fader stereo outputs from every channel in the mixer. which is handy for multi-tracking. It's also handy to use those for different things during my performances. Yeah, I love the way that they made, for example, the effects send knobs are the largest knobs because those are often the ones that you're using the most in a live performance. So I like that they're much bigger. The volume faders are long throw. Sorry again. Long throw and very smooth. Like all the buttons and knobs feel really good. Same on the Performance Mixer Mark II. Longer faders this time as well, and they also feel great. It still has the small knobs for the effects ends, which I wish they were a little bit bigger, but unfortunately they're not. And then, yeah, just being able to do things like selecting things. You can select if you have two mono inputs, you can select it to be two monos in one channel, and then you can use the pan to crossfade between the two of them. So the 6-channel in effects becomes a 12-channel. I like the little expanders, like this is the Exelon XI3, which I believe comes out next week, if I'm not wrong. This one and the Q module both come out next week. And this is a 3-channel expander for the Exelon that has volume and the 2 effects sends. And then it has volume CV, and you have different buses that you can send things out on as well. So it gives you kind of the basics for bringing other instruments or another performer or whatever into your mixing system without having to have huge expanders like this, which is pretty sweet as well. So yeah, I mean, functionally, the Exelon and the WMD Performance Mixer Mark II they're both going to work for live performance if you're into that. The only reason why I'm using the Exelon, like I said, is because of the whole ecosystem and not just the mixer itself. So yeah, that was the motivation there. So let's see here. Why did you move from Bitbox to Blackbox? Yeah, so actually I did the other way around. I started with Blackbox, then I got a Bitbox, and then I went back to the Blackbox because I had the full-size Bitbox. It was just taking up too much space in my case, and it was frustrating. One of the things that I missed a lot from this one is having the buttons to be able to switch to the different functionality, and also being able to stop-start on the face of the thing. If for some reason it got out of sync with the Bitbox in your case, you have to physically pull out the clock or the MIDI, however you have it synced, wait 5 seconds for it to stop, and then plug it back in order for it to restart. And that was really frustrating because that's one of those things that can go wrong during a show. And you always want to be able to have control over that. So you're not, like with this one, I could do stop start really quick and just get it right back in. With that one, I didn't have that functionality. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I am thinking about the Bitbox Micro, because again, it doesn't take up much space. And if I have, hopefully I'll be getting the Noisite Drop soon. And if I have that to be able to control the functionality via MIDI inside the Micro, that's going to give me a lot of options to be able to launch things, use the volume faders, control internal effects, have scenes of different things that I can control within it. So that might make the difference. So I'm considering that right now. So we'll see. But in the meantime, I'm testing out some ideas with the Blackbox to see how that will work. And if I like how it's working with the Blackbox, then I'll put the Bitbox Micro into my case. I'll still keep my Blackbox though. I absolutely love this thing. It's one of those kind of, whenever you need it, it's there. And so I always keep it, and sometimes it's in my performance rig, sometimes it's not, but it's not for lack of wanting to use it. It's just that I maybe am trying a different piece of gear, but this one always ends up coming back. So yeah, it's, I love it. I love the Blackbox. It's one of my absolute favorite tools. So let's see here. Since I thought it would be good for performance. Oh yeah, that mixer. Yeah, not so much. It's a functional audio mixer. It is not a performance mixer. There's still a gaping hole in the market for a performance mixer, which I am hoping will be filled relatively soon. Like hopefully, yeah, soon. Looking forward to hopefully having a mixer, because right now your options are those mixers like that Jelly Mix or the Baby Sherry or the Zoom one, which I always forget the name of. So if you remember it, put it in the chat. So you can use those ones that are kind of functional. You can use the Native Instruments TX6, which is actually an amazing mixer, but it's too small to actually use functionally. Too bad, because the capabilities are great. If they would have made it twice as big, it would have been a really good performance mixer, but it's not. So you got to use one of those, or you're going to use an Octatrack with very limited inputs as a mixer and your effect stuff, or something modular like the Exelon or the WMD or one of those, or you're going to use a DJ mixer, which you can't travel with. So the options are limited. You know, like I think Board Brain and sorry, Board Brain and WMD have done a really, really good job of creating performance mixers in modular format. Now we need somebody to create something similar, but in standalone. You know, a performance mixer that's actually usable and functional and playable like these are, but in a standalone format that doesn't have to be used with modular. Like you could put these in a little tiny box and set them up, but by the time you got a mixer, a case, power supply, any other inputs that you would want with it, I mean, you'd be looking at, $2,000, $2,500 to put all of that together just to make a mixer. So it's something needs to come out that is functional like these two mixers are, but that's in a format that's portable and that's designed to be played as an instrument, played as a performance tool, rather than just functionally mix things together with volume pots, because that's, I don't know, it's a lot harder to perform that way. It's just not, you don't have the same feel as being able to like bring in multiple things at the same time at different levels, which if you're doing like just doing a movement like this, where I could just bring in 6 things at different levels, you couldn't do that with a mixer with knobs, because you can only do 1 at a time or 2 at a time, right? So way less functional. So I'm looking forward to the day that one of these big companies figures that out, that there's a giant hole in the market that needs to be filled. So let's see what else here. Performance mixer market is slim for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there are any. There's not a single performance mixer out there. There's the Roland thing that came out years and years and years ago. There was, I think, the right idea, but with a really poor implementation. But other than that, there's just not anything. There's not anything that's a proper playable mixer, that's portable, and that's not, that's not modular, and that's not basically like a little desktop unit, which is also not super functional or playable or whatever. So I think there's a definite gaping hole that you would think one of these big companies would figure that out, but whatever. I've been complaining about it for years. Nobody cares. So let's see. Wing for quality or money? Oh, why? I don't know. I just don't know about it. I don't even know what it is. Let me know what it is in there and I will answer you. Let's see. Electron best videos on YouTube. Thanks. I think EasyBot does the best Electron videos on YouTube, but that's just me. Okay, now the WMD mixer looks sick. Might have to look into building a small palette system just for performance. Yeah, and you totally could. And I mean, like I said, WMD performance mixer, Exelon, they're both really good. Before I was using the Exelon, I was using the Performance Mixer Mark I, and I had had that for years and really loved it. And then Exelon came along. The size of the knobs for the effect sends was a huge selling point for me. Having all of the different attachments and connectors that you can do from the back so you don't have to patch was really great. So like obviously these outputs, but then there's also like, for example, there's a module for output to ADAT, which is great if you've got a push 3 or you want to connect it for multi-tracking in your studio. There's another module that is a 4-band EQ, and so you can send things to that. You can have that on a mix bus, and you've got different mix buses that you can send out. So that's all designed to work with this. They have the monitor module, which is a way to have multiple pathways from the Exelon going out to a main out that you then have control over with in queuing and all of that stuff. And you can kind of mix and match and make whatever mixer you want out of it. So very cool system. But both mixers are really good, great quality, sound good, fun to play. They're just different, right? I have the WMD in my big case for studio because it is really big. It's even bigger than the Exelon. So it's really big, so I leave it in that case so it doesn't take up so much space. But I use it all the time in my studio case. So, yes. In my opinion, the black box didn't sync well often. I don't know. I haven't had any sync issues with it at all. We're using MIDI, yeah, or clock sync. So I'm MIDI syncing it from the Oxy, and it works great. And it does, reset like right on time. I use it for launching loops and then also sometimes sequencing and things. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I use that one a lot. Zoom L6, yep, that's the one. Do 3 at a time if you're creative enough. Yeah, I guess. I was talking to somebody recently that said that they were using rubber bands between knobs so they could turn one knob and have it turn 2 knobs together, which is, I guess, a creative workaround to dysfunctional gear. Or you could just get functional gear in the first place, I guess. Let's see, totally agree on that Roland mixer. Yeah, it was cool. It was a great idea. Like they recognized early on that there was a big gap for a mixer, and then they put one out that was not super functional. So that was unfortunate for them. Did you have a look to the Skull Circuit mixer? I did not. Should I have? Let me take a look and see what that looks like. I'll take it out. Let's see. Compact Model 1 kind of mixer is needed. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the thing with the Model 1 is it's huge and heavy, but it's great. It's analog, it has built-in filters, it has multiple effect sends, all of that stuff. It does have EQ per channel, which I guess is a plus, but to be honest, EQ for me is way less important in modular than it is when you're DJing. So it's important in a DJ mixer because that 4-band EQ that the Allen and Heath mixers have, it's your only way to blend from one track into another in a smooth way is to take out frequencies from one and bring them in from the other so that it comes across really smooth. With modular, you can do that instrument to instrument. So you can change frequencies within an individual instrument, which you can't do with a completed track. So you have to do it with an EQ in order to make that make sense. So for a DJ mixer, those EQs are absolutely essential. For a live performance mixer, I'm not convinced. I don't think it would need those. And I think that way you could make things be much smaller because you wouldn't have to have all that length for long faders, effect sends, EQ, because by the time you do that, now you're getting to the size of a DJ mixer, and then it becomes impractical to travel with. So having something that is compact and with some connectability, so you could bring together a whole bunch of devices into a thing that's playable, I think is definitely needed. Definitely. Would you use a Eurorack sequencer over the Oxy? No. To be honest, I would not use any sequencer over the Oxy. I've been using the Oxy 1 now. I was using the Mark 1 for about 4 years now, I think. think it's almost 4 years now. And I had other internal sequencers in my modular case prior to that, and it has replaced them all. So yeah, I mean, there's, I can't find any, or I haven't seen any internal modular sequencers that can do anywhere near what the Oxy can do, and it can do all the things that they can do. And it's also a centralized place that has a ton of flexibility to control a lot of different stuff, and not just an individual thing within the modular world. So for me, the flexibility and being able to learn one workflow and then move on from there is pretty key. So yeah, there's not another sequencer that I would select over the Oxy. Now that's not saying there aren't other great sequencers out there, of which there are. I mean, like in the case sequencers, I love the WMD Metron. There's a bunch of good ones for in the modular case. Also external sequencers, things like the Hapax and the Torso T1, also really great. But for me, the Oxy kind of rules over them all, just for all the capabilities that it has and the flexibility that it has, the fact that it's battery powered, you know, all the extras that it has, you know, Bluetooth MIDI and, you know, all the different outputs. And I don't know, it's just for me, the way my brain works, this is the kind of the ultimate sequencer. But for other people, they don't gel with this, and maybe they gel better with a Torso T1. Well, that's great. Then you should get a Torso T1. I'm just saying, for me personally, I wouldn't go back to using in the case sequencers. I'm a big fan of the Oxy. So, let's see what else. Hey James, what's going on? If you had to triage your gear for performance, where would you place the heat plus effects? Heat plus effects is non-essential, but a positive. So, and I would say especially when playing on really big systems that sound really good, I definitely would add the heat plus effects, because it gives me a great low cut, gives me great saturation, helps make me sound more like finished tracks when I'm playing. So it would be pretty high up there. So like I mentioned, I'm thinking about taking the Digitakt out and doing either the Black Box or the Bitbox Micro in my case. And in that case, my travel rig would be modular, Oxy 1 Mark II, and analog heat plus effects. So it would be the one box that kind of survived. Now, there are a couple of other boxes that are really good too, as well as some modules that you could put inside your case. The Endorphins Golden Master is very cool, and that comes in a module or a pedal. What else? The Auto Boom is also a cool pedal, although they don't do exactly the same thing the Heat Plus Effects does, which is why I use this one. But yeah, it's pretty high up there. It would be pretty high up in the pecking order, I guess, of stuff. Will you keep the Proteus? Yeah, I definitely will. Not for live performance. It wouldn't go in my performance case, but and I guess I should qualify what I was saying about the Oxy. As far as the Oxy goes, it is my performance sequencer. I have, if you look, here, let me take this out of the way. You can see, if I tip this camera up a little bit, you can see I have a big modular case over here. Let me take my camera thing off of it. I have a big modular case over here, which is all of my modules that aren't for live performance. And in that case, I have my bigger modules and my modules that I really love, but that don't lend themselves to live performance or travel. So that's why I have the Performance Mixer Mark II. I have my WMD Metron. I have my Proteus. I have a whole bunch of other things in here, plus some like voices and effects and things that I really like, but that aren't good to fit into a small case. Like I have a DPO voice in here, which I absolutely love, but it's not great for live performance, so it stays here. I have a Belgrade filter here, which I really love, but it's big for a filter. Most of my filters in here are 4 HP. So just being able to have a place for these where I can use them, where I can patch things into them from my case while I'm writing stuff, and then I can sample from that into, say, the Black Box or into the Digitakt. Yeah, it's handy. And so having a sequencer like the Metron here, having the WMD mixer here is great. And then having things like the Proteus as well, which is great for generative sequencing. So all of those things are cool to have, but they don't go with the whole live performance thing. So because of that, they don't make the cut as far as going in my performance case. So that's why they're in the big case, if that makes sense. If I can get this to fit back in there. I guess that looks okay. Anyway, so yes, I will keep the Proteus, but for writing and not necessarily for live performance. Hapax is cool also. It is. It's very cool. The Hapax is a great sequencer. And I think it actually has, in some sense, it has additional functionality to the Oxy. Being able to have two scenes at once and work on one while you've got the other one playing is very cool. The deciding factors for me on the Oxy over the Hapax was the Hapax is not battery powered and the Oxy is, and the Hapax is also significantly bigger. I mean, it's like 3 or 4 Oxys thick and like 2.5 Oxys like around. So it's much bigger than the Oxy, which for me is as far as traveling goes, that's kind of an essential thing, is the size of the gear. And battery powered is great. Like the Oxy, I can use this to write ideas when I'm on the plane. I can, because it's battery powered and has Bluetooth MIDI, I can put sorry again. I can put AUM on my phone with different synth apps, and I can use Bluetooth MIDI from the Oxy with my AirPods, and I have no cables for MIDI or power or anything, and I can still write patterns in the Oxy that I can save and then transfer to my modular or to hardware when I get back to studio. So having that capability is really cool, and that's something that you don't get from either the T1 or the Hapax. Although they're both great sequencers, the Oxy kind of does that extra bit for me, which was important. So let's see. Jealous you got a prototype from Blue Nautilus. Yes, it was cool, and I have the only black one, which I'm also pretty proud of. It's the only black Proteus. I think Blue Nautilus is launching officially next week or in 2 weeks. So the Proteus will be available to everybody soon. I know he's assembling them now. So I know you improvise your sets, but how can you use the Oxy to change from one song to the next without stopping? Something that is tricky on Electron devices, for instance. So yeah, I mean, you kind of answered the question. In the question, because I'm improvising, I'm not going from one song to the next. I don't have a song prepared that I'm then changing to another song that's prepared. So my sets are basically one long song with a whole bunch of different iterations and voices coming and going throughout and change-ups of rhythms. And so I'm writing live on the fly. I'm writing new patterns. I'm doing new sound design live on the fly. So I don't have to think about getting from point A to point B, because there is no point A and there is no point B. It's just all one thing. So for me, that's the way I do it. But one of the things we talk about in my course is that there's a lot of ways to do that. Sorry again. A lot of ways to do that. So having different things in your bag of tricks, like different ways to do combinations of effects, or to switch, crossfading, or fading out and fading in, one bass line for another bass line, and then moving on to another instrument. Having those transitions happen instrument by instrument rather than song by song makes it a lot smoother. When you try to find a smooth way to jump from one point to another, it becomes difficult. Although I do know, I have a friend of mine who uses the Electron boxes, and he creates his patterns on the top row of the 16 patterns of the sequencer, and then anything that's on the bottom row in between is a transitional pattern. So he might go to a pattern over here and then transition to another song. So we'll have like four like the first four patterns are one song, the next four patterns are another song, and then there's a transitional bit in between where they share some of the same instruments. And so I know that that's one way to do it, although it's also kind of complicated. But there's not an easy way to get from point A to point B. And like we were talking about with mixers, when you're DJing, you have track A and track B, and then you have multi-band EQs to be able to try to smoothly morph from one end to the next. And because we don't generally have multi-band EQs by side or by track in live performance, it makes it a bit more difficult. Now, if you're using a DJ mixer and you have certain instruments, like if you ever look at Dave Meck's old setup that he used to play, he was using an Allen and Heath mixer, and he had a digitact and a digitone on one side, a digitact and a digitone on the other side. So he would play track one on those two devices. Then he would mix over to track two, which was in the other devices, and he would use the DJ mixer and mix between them exactly as if you were mixing between two tracks. So you got to find some creative workarounds if you're going to do that style where you're preparing tracks in advance. It's one of the reasons why I don't play that way, is because it's always really easy to tell when somebody's playing a live set, and no matter how smooth they try to be, there's always this one moment where there's this awkward jolt into the next thing. And I wanted my sets to sound like DJ sets, where you make them as smooth as you possibly can. And I can do that by morphing from one, song idea into another song idea without having to go from point A to point B. And so that's kind of what I've opted for with the improvised stuff. Let's see where we're at here. Relic Instruments. That was cool. It was a cool device. What it reminded me of was like an Ableton Push for CV. So it was kind of like 16 by 16 grid that you can use to control things, and everything is to control CV. So it's very cool. It was a cool instrument, but like you said, it's gigantic. But it's basically like a giant MIDI controller, but it's via CV instead of MIDI. But it's just a big control device for controlling a lot of different CV parameters. But very cool. They've been showing that at Superbooth for like the last 3 years. They've had different iterations, and this year it kind of felt like it was done. Felt like they're ready to put it out. I don't know if it may already be out, but in past years it felt like it wasn't quite done yet, and this year it definitely felt like it was ready to roll. Let's see here. Can fry an egg on the heat. Yeah, all these analog devices get pretty hot. The Syntax the same way, analog rhythm, they all get really hot. Chase Bliss Clean is very good also for stereo end of chain. Yes, I haven't used the Chase Bliss at all, but if I'm not mistaken, it's because it doesn't do exactly what I want an end of chain to do. So that's kind of why I went to the analog heat. But yeah, it's Chase Bliss makes great pedals. Let's see here. Droid can do a lot that the Oxy one can do, and you can customize it to your likings, but it's not for everyone. Yes, it can do a few of the things that Oxy can do. A few. So Christopher is one of my former students, and he also works for Droid. Like, he was working at their booth at Superbooth. So big fan of Droid, which is, yeah, it's a cool thing. If you're into that ecosystem, it's definitely flexible. You can customize it to your liking for sure. Let's see. Appreciate the clarity on the heat. I've been reconsidering the Digitact 2's place. No, not using the Digitone 2 in performance. I was using the Digitact 2 during this tour. And I have, and as I mentioned, when I got back, I started reconsidering, and that's why you see the black box here and not the Digitact 2, because I'm seeing if I can do what I want to in a much smaller box. And if I can, this much smaller box may become a Bitbox Micro in my case. So it just gives me one less thing to haul around. So for the chat, you can perform both of the projects on the Hapex at the same time. 32 sets of patterns. Yes, it is a lot. Much love. What's up? Also on the haptics, you can see all 32 at once for mutes and solos. Yes, you can, correct. Got the haptics before I went modular, so the 4x16 MIDI channels was awesome, but now I'm running into issues with only 4 CV and 4 gate outs. Yeah, I mean, you can also do MIDI to CV conversion, which is what you would kind of do with the Oxy, because the Oxy is 8 CV and 8 gate outs, which is still not a ton. When you have 8 mod lanes per sequencer, and you've got 8 sequencers, so you have 64 mod lanes, but this one has 96 channels of outgoing MIDI now. And so to be able to use some of those to go into a module in your case that's a MIDI to CV converter, and then use that CV to modulate things is kind of the way you need to go to get that happening. Let's see, got the cycle and the D-Attack, but I do not use. Almost the same idea, but I keep one kick from cycle, can tune, change hats, melodies. Yeah, it's all about coming up with a creative way to make things go between one and the other. Yeah, there you go. James is answering the same question that I did too. Yeah, there was a new one that was showing at Superbooth, and I can't remember who did it. That's a new MIDI to CV converter that gives you 16 outputs that can either be CV or gate, which is cool. There's also the Mutant Brain, I think, hex inverter. Another one to check out. Let's see. So when I change the pattern, I try to take almost everything and leave the kick from cycle. What I learned is pedals. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, that's something we talk about in the course as well, is kind of ways to cover things up. You know, like if you were doing something like if you had a kick pattern and you wanted to change that kick pattern to a kind of a breakbeat style kick, you can filter. You can filter up, and then as you're filtered up, you can change it. And then when you drop back in, you're dropping back into the actual pattern that you were going to go to before. So that's one way to do it. Right? So you can do things like that, or you can add reverbs, or you can, you can totally mute it and change it and then have it drop in as a different thing. There's all kinds of different tricks that you can learn using combinations of effects and faders and filters and sound design and things like that to be able to mask those transitions. But ultimately, what I found the easiest way to do it is to have modules or synths that are flexible enough that they can be different things. So like, for example, if I have a kick like this, rather than having to have another kick or multiple samples just to be able to modify this kick into something else totally and have it still work, allows me to have just one kick, but that kick can be all the kicks. And it goes the same for everything. Being able to have devices like the pizza. So it can sound like that, melodic, or I can quickly change octave. So I can move the same voice into a totally different sound relatively quickly and easily with octave switching and with some great flexibility of the actual device itself. Right? So you can use one voice for multiple things. So that's where selecting the right voices, modules, or the right synths is really important, and not just getting like, oh, that one sounds cool. Okay, well, it's great if it sounds cool, but if it only does one thing, it's not going to be very functional when you need to morph it into something else. So having modules that can be one thing or a lot of other things, like having something like the, where are we at here? Track 4, I Okay, it's muted, yeah. So having something like a bass, they can sound 8080, or you can add a sub oscillator, or you can detune, make it into a super saw. So having, again, one voice that can be a lot of voices is way more valuable than having something that sounds really good for one particular thing. So flexibility is key to everything. All right, let's see, where are we at? Expert sleepers. Oh yeah, the output, for sure. Cool. Well, any other questions, comments, anything you want to know about from Superbooth? Some great questions in here, for sure. But yeah, if there's other questions about Superbooth or about the travel and tour and gigs and all that kind of stuff, happy to answer. And then, yeah, for sure, obviously about the Oxy One Mark II as well, because it's something new and different and unique, for sure. Interesting. Anyway, what else? Did you bring back some gear from Superbooth? Yes, I did. The Oxy One Mark II. And over in my big case, I have the Shakmat Bishop's Miscellany, which I haven't had a chance to dive into yet, but I will be very soon. So, yes. Find sequencing is very personal. Everyone uses sequencers a bit differently, and what to do different things depending very much on the music. Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about all these sequencers. And that's why I always try to say that, like, the Oxy One is the best one for me. I'm not saying it's the best one. I know plenty of people that are not inspired by this, and maybe they're inspired by the Torso T1, or they, they find the Hapax really works with their workflow and their mind and the way they look at things. That's great. And there's a lot of great stuff out there. For me, the Oxy One really kind of revolutionized the way that I perform music, and it's become such a central, pivotal thing to my whole live performance setup that I'm always comparing everything to it for my particular needs, and I haven't found anything that I like more for my needs. But again, your needs are going to be totally different from my needs. So when you find the thing that works for you, you should absolutely get that thing, for sure. Now you can use also the flow function from MKII to make transitions. When you're using the flow, can you edit the kick sequence? No. So flow is not like a loop or repeat. It's basically it's kind of like the scene in an octatrack where when it's engaged, it's doing certain parameter locked things. So if you change up things during that, it would lock those things to the flow button. So the way you assign things to flow is you hold down flow while you're doing something. And so if you were to do something while you were holding flow, it would just assign it to that. And as soon as you let it go, everything you changed would disappear. So it doesn't really work that way, unfortunately. That's not what it's for. It's basically like a fill, but a fill that acts as like a scene in the octatrack, where you can hold it down and it activates a number of different parameters that you've assigned to the flow function. Okay, so yeah, it doesn't act as a kind of under the it's not doing like a loop that you can then change stuff and then release the loop. It's not that kind of thing. Sequencer sometimes changes the way music sounds. Yeah, totally. Certain sequencers, like for example, if you use the T1, it's very it's very distinctive. Like you can hear in music when people use the T1 to do something because it has certain patterns that it does all the time, and those become recognizable. So it will definitely change the way your music sounds. It's like if you always use Euclidean sequencing, the Euclidean patterns become really recognizable after a while. Like you know what a 5/9 sounds like in Euclidean no matter where you hear it. So you can pick it right away as a Euclidean sequence. So yeah, definitely it changes the way your music sounds. Hello, hello. The Bastille crust is very versatile. Nice. I have not messed around with that one yet. Chat, he only coughs when he looks at us. It's our fault that he's sick. Yeah. I'm coughing no matter what I'm looking at. It's this ridiculous dry cough that I have since I left. All right. First time here. Sweet. Welcome. Glad to have you. Welcome to the live stream. Good to have you here. Again, any questions you guys have, please pop them in the chat, because that's, for me, that's why I do live streams, is instead of just like regular videos, I could do a video on the Oxy, or I could do a video on my travel rig or whatever. But I like the interaction. I like to be able to answer questions rather than having to do like the thing that all the people that I know that are YouTubers are always kind of doing, which is trying to second guess what people want and then make a video about that thing. I would rather just do a live stream and have you guys ask the questions that you want answered in the live stream. And that way I don't have to guess what you want to see. So if you have questions, please pop them in there and I am happy to answer whatever. Let's see here. Missed the chat. I think that's it. Got to the bottom of the chat. So what else? James, what's up? Crust is like the pizza and Archer's rig had a baby. Yeah, it is kind of like that. It's kind of like FM percussion stuff. But I'm excited to get the Shakmat Ballista, their new all-in-one voice, because it's kind of like, it sounds and acts a lot like the Bastille Pizza, but in a way that has larger knobs and is way more playable and functional. Has a built-in filter, has two built-in filters that you can set high pass, low pass, so you can do like MS-20 style filtering. And the way the FM works within it is really super cool. Like it sounds awesome. I cannot wait to get that in my case because I love the pizza. I lean on that all the time. So having a second voice that acts in a similar way, like acts in a way that is really versatile, that I can take from super deep groovy bass lines all the way to really high kind of crystally metallic percussion and everything in between is, I'm definitely looking forward to that. Let's see, learning modular and VCV rack now. Great place to start, VCV rack. I will say, as you learn modular and VCV rack, just know that you're gaining knowledge of how to use modular, but the one thing you're missing is the best part about modular, which is the tactile part of it. The ability to actually touch and move knobs and like, I turn this and that happens, and I turn this and that happens. It's hard to get that same from like the click and drag with the mouse. Although you learn a ton about patching and how modulation works and all that stuff in VCV rack, it's a super useful tool. All I'm saying is that when you move into actual hardware modular, you're gonna have a whole nother layer of fun in the feel of actually playing the instrument with your hands. Makes it a blast. A blast. What is your most used feature on the Oxy? The most powerful that you haven't worked into your flow yet? I think most used feature, I mean, I don't know, that's hard to say. I mean, obviously the most used feature is just the sequencing. You know, like I use multi-sequencers a lot. And so to have multiple lanes and being able to see the interrelationship of notes and voices next to each other while you're while you're sequencing is really powerful. So I like that. I also really love the functionality of being able to generate random pitch in key, whatever key you assign, to gate patterns without changing the gate pattern. So if you were to set up a gate like, is this muted? No, that's why. So if you were to set up a gate pattern that you liked, like, take off the effects. So if you were to set up a gate pattern that you like, and then you can go into the random generator, and you can, instead of generating random notes and pitches where it would put all sorts of stuff, if you wanted to keep these notes exactly where they are, you can just generate pitch. Each time you press this. So it would be in the key that you've assigned with the range that you assign here. So like, let's say you wanted it to only have a range of 6 semitones. So you can have it do like that. So it keeps your rhythm the same. So let's say you have a rhythm that you really like. Right? So let's say you really dig that rhythm, but you want to have the melodic pitch change, but stay with the same rhythm. You can just generate the pitch. Oh, that's why. And then of course you can go in and edit individual notes, take them out, or add in more. So you can use that random generation to give you ideas, and it gives you a lot of control over the gate, because you decide where the rhythmic gates go, and then it allows you to use the randomness to just generate pitch, but then you have the control over generating pitch in key. So I use that a lot within the Oxy to generate ideas. What else? Yeah, there's plenty of stuff that I don't use. Like I don't use any of the arranger modes because I don't save any patterns. So that's a really powerful thing that I don't use, that I may start using a bit more, just to incorporate some things as I find things I really like, just saving it as a pattern that I can come back to. But I generally don't do that. Another thing, because I don't do, the music that I make is not super melodic, there's some functionality in here where you can set one sequencer as kind of the master sequencer. So let's say you have it in chord mode and you've got a pattern of chords that you like, and then on other sequencers you do, you know, a melody and a counter melody and a bass line that all are in the key of that chord. You can then set those to follow the chord mode. So if you change key, or you can play it in live, and if you play a new chord, it will have all of the other ones follow, and it'll quantize each note to the nearest note in the new scale. And so I don't use that at all, but it's a really super powerful function. So if you're doing stuff that's more melodic, you can play live chords and pads and chord changes, and have melodies and bass lines follow your live playing, which is super powerful, and I don't use it at all. So that's probably the most powerful thing I don't use. VCV doesn't teach moderation. No, I said modulation, but not moderation, definitely. Yeah, modular can get expensive. It's deceptive. It's kind of like going to a sushi restaurant. You're like, oh, that's only $8, but I want 6 of them, so now I've spent $50. So it's the same with modular. You're like, oh, this module is only $100. Oh, that module is only $300. It's not like you're buying a $10,000 synth, but before you know it, you have a $10,000 synth. So yes, I totally agree with that. See, can you explain how you set up the pizza? Yes, so this control knob down here on the bottom can be set up to control shape, mod index, pitch. You can set it to control anything. It's kind of an assignable knob. And the way I have it assigned is as an internal envelope. So basically the way this works, let me see, can you see that? Yeah, I think you can see it pretty well. The way this works is, let's just do something really basic here so you can really hear it sounding. So you hear right now that click. That's because it's totally vertical. So that's the shortest envelope you can have. If you move this knob to the right, it will lengthen the decay. Right? And then if you take it back to center, you get just the click. If you go to the left, you extend the decay, but also extend the attack as well. So again, internal envelope, if it's set up this way, it allows you to not have to have an external envelope to control this, which is super handy and space saving. So to be able to have all that in, I think it's 8 HP, I think so. Yeah, it's not 10, so it must be 8. Yeah, in 8 HP is pretty handy. The only thing it's missing is a filter, so I've got a WMD carbon next to it. So it's going through filter. And I like the carbon because it kind of, it gives it, it makes it a little bit kind of imperfect and gritty because FM synths can sound a bit too pristine, and that's what makes them sound like really metallic sometimes and tinny. So putting it through the carbon kind of roughs it up a bit without having it be like super wave folding overdrive or whatever. So I like that combo a lot. But that's how I set up the control knob to be the internal envelope. So it gives me control over that really easily. So that one has internal envelope control. So does the BIA. So does the Archer's rig. So does the battering ram, just decay. I guess click counts as transient. The baseline also has an internal envelope. So does the Percon's voice. So does the Polycinematic. And so does the Oxy Coral. So basically everything in my case has internal envelopes, which is why I don't have any envelopes in my case at all. So yeah, no envelopes and no VCAs other than the ones in the mixer. And yeah, saves a lot of space. So if you're learning VCV, a friend turned me on to Bisset Blank, which makes your cables animate with the voltage. Oh, that sounds cool. I would definitely take a look at that. Doing the random generate steps on Oxy, you can lock some note step that you want to keep and randomize the other. No, you can't. So you have the choice to randomize just the pitch or randomize the pitch and gate together, but you can't randomize individual notes using the random generator. But now, with the Mark II, being able to use the accumulator, that's basically a way to randomize in different ways an individual step. So again, if we go, here, I'll open this back up. So if I was to start to add the accumulator to this step, so that can give me some random generation on one step. And then if I want, I can copy that step and I can place that in other places. And when I paste it, it pastes with also the accumulator. So then I've got randomization on both of those, and I can change up the parameters of the accumulator on each one. So you can see it's really quick to come up with interesting stuff. And then as I was showing before, now if you were to put in things like, let's take out this step. And then on this one, we can add in some of those repeats. And then we can add, again, the accumulator with those repeats. So yeah, you see how quickly it is to come up with 4 notes, but then using the accumulator and using the repeats, you can come up with all sorts of different interesting variations. And then, as I showed before, if you're doing this as well, and you switch to performance mode, now, so we've got this on sequencer 2, now we have the ability to transpose. So I can do So lots of different flexibility you can do with all the different performance features here. So anyway, let's see. 6 sushi rolls. Yeah, man. Go big. Need to try pizza. Yeah, it's my go-to voice now. Pizza, and now the Percon's voice, which is funny because I got the Percon's voice thinking that I was going to use it for percussion, and I'm using it for all sorts of cool tonal stuff. So like, here, let's bring the kick down a little bit. That's the Percon's voice. And that's one algorithm, right? So all that's Percon's voice. So again, I thought I was going to use it for drums and percussion, and I'm not using it for drums and percussion at all because it makes all those other cool sounds. So I'm using all those ones. Anyway, see what else. Have the basal and you can change the firmware. Yeah. Any chance to see the accumulator on MKII? I have no idea, honestly. I don't know how much of the new stuff that's on here can fit or be handled by the MKII, because I know they upgraded a bunch of stuff to be able to do this. I'm sure that anything that can go on the MKII will at some point, because Manuel's very good about adding in new updates. I'm sure there are things that won't be able to go in, but I have no idea what those are at this point. So you'd have to ask them. If you're on their Discord, shoot in a message and say, what are things that might someday make their way into the Mark I? But I would just say, the Mark I is what it is, and it's an amazing device. Don't worry about any future upgrades. And if you get one, be happy. If you want all the upgrades, go to the Mark II, and you're gonna have all the upgrades, and you can be happy with that. So, all right. Have the Incus Ateritas Alia, which is also FM. Yes, it is, but it does not sound like the Pizza. Pizza, the closest thing I found, so Pizza sounds like the new voice from Shachmat. And I don't say sounds like, they're in the same kind of family of FM sounding. And the other one that I think is in that family is the WMD Legion. That's the other one that has the same kind of super fat FM sound, and doesn't sound just like plinky plink metallic, hitting two glasses together, or like hitting a metal pan or whatever. FM can sound really metallic, really plinky. And so these ones have this real thickness to them, which I really like. And it's a bit different. So anyway, Morph Modular, what's going on? So for everybody who was asking all those questions about the Morph Modular case before, they are in the chat. But I think we already went over everything that the new case does, which I'm pretty stoked on. So hopefully I'll see it. Is it transposing in scale? So, I mean, kind of. So what it's doing is it's just transposing by semitones everything that you have entered in. And if you have things entered in scale, it will transpose those by semitones. So it won't transpose, it won't quantize to scale, but it will transpose the scale that you've already written by semitones. So when you're in performance mode, every button that you go to the right, you're going up one semitone. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitones up, 4 down, 7 down, and then back to the center. So you're transposing your whole melody that was in scale, or bass line that was in scale, up or down by semitones. So the relationship stays the same, but it is not quantizing to the original scale, okay? But you can, so let's say all of your voices were all in key and they're all in a certain scale and you want to transpose, you can transpose them all up 3 or 5 or down 3 or down, like this. So you can actually do them all at once, so that you can move everything so that it basically stays in key with one another, relative to one another, and it all transposes up. So yeah, you can get around it pretty easily just because it's quick to be able to do that kind of stuff in here. So, gotta hop. All right, see you later, Herbie. Good to have you on here. Yeah, I'll feel better. I actually feel fine. It's the cough is lingering, but I'm feeling much better, which is good. Found the answer from Oxia MK1 V5 features on the Discord. Okay, what was the answer? Will it be coming? I don't know, because I'm sure more people will ask me. See, well, I think that's it. Well, I guess we'll call it there. Thank you guys very much. It's been great to have you. It's nice to get back to a live stream. Please sign up for one of the courses if you'd like to. If you've ever been on the fence, now is the time to do it. Because as I mentioned, they're 50% off right now, limited time. Once those first 5 go at 50% of each one of the courses, then they drop down to 40% and then 30% and then 20%. So you get the biggest discount if you sign up right now. You get about 8 hours of group live Zoom coaching, 1 hour one-on-one, 50 videos, access to the online group, which has become a really cool place to hang out, and you get weekly feedback via email. So on your performances or your production, depending on which course you're taking. And if you just want to do the video only course and save a little money, those are available 50% off at the time for this limited time as well. So jump in, grab it right now. If you've ever thought about it, now's the time to do it. And yeah, other than that, oh, sorry, we have an answer here. What is the carbon filter adds to the sound? It's just, it adds kind of a grittiness to the sound that kind of, it makes the FM sound less FM. It makes it sound more like an analog synth, and less like that kind of metallic-y FM sound. I just like the extra harmonics that it adds that makes it sound a bit grittier. Let's see, here's what I know currently, 5.0 for MKII. Custom chords for poly swing on ARP. Roller, LSB program changes now possible to send either on H sequencers or track harmonizal scale in Matrix. Okay, cool. All right, well, thank you guys very much. Thanks again for being here for the live stream, and hope to catch you on the next one. If you have any questions, feel free to, and you didn't get a chance to ask them, feel free to post them in the comments of the video, and I try to answer back as many as I can. And if you have questions about the courses as well, you can ask them there, or you can reach out to me. Easiest way is probably Messenger on Instagram at Circle Live. And yeah, I guess we'll see you at the next one. Thank you guys very much. And yeah, have a great rest of your